Hello NEET aspirants, welcome to Bloom with Bio. I am Divya. Are you ready to dive into the most fascinating topic in biology? Then let's go and uncover the secret of how an organism moves. Yes, today's topic is locomotion and movement. It is one of the most important topics for NEET aspirants. It contains high-yielding concepts and frequently asked MCQs. So let us go and break down the science behind movement. Movement is a feature that is shared by all the living organisms. So what does that mean? All the living organisms move. Then you'll ask me about plants, fungus. They also shows movement. So let us take an example of a unicellular organism like amoeba. Amoeba moves its body by cytoplasmic streaming. So coming to the plants, even though they are sedentary, they also shows movement. Now I am moving my hands, I am talking, I am moving my jawbones, I am moving my tongue. Everything is moving now, right? But am I moving from one place to another? So what is locomotion? If I stand from here, if I go and sit somewhere else, that is locomotion. So whatever I am doing now is not locomotion, it is just movement. So can we tell like this? All locomotions are movement, but all movements are not locomotions. So there are three types of movements in our body. One is amoeboid movement. Then we have ciliary movement. Then we have muscular movement. So where can you find amoeboid movements in our body? Like the macrophages and the lymphocytes in blood, and the cytoskeleton elements like myofibrils show amoeboid movements in our body. So ciliary movements are mainly found in the brush-bordered epithelium like our respiratory tract and also the fallopian tube. So what does this help in? They'll help in the movement of substances which comes in contact with them. So the muscular movement in our body is attained by three different muscles. So what are they? So first one is striated muscles. Then we have the smooth muscles and the cardiac muscles. So we are going to see all these three in detail now. So first one is striated muscles. Why are they called as striated muscles? Because they have alternate dark and light striations. So why do they have this dark and light striations? Because of the presence of contractile proteins. And what are they? That is actin and myosin. Since these striated muscles are attached to our bones, they are called as skeletal muscles. And since these muscles are involved in the voluntary actions, they are also called as voluntary muscles. So there are three names for our striated muscles. One is striated, then we have skeletal muscles, then the voluntary muscles. The cells in these muscles are long, which do not have a tapering end. They are unbranched and they are multinucleated. So these are mainly found in the limbs, pharynx, tongue and beginning of esophagus. So these type of muscles will show rapid and powerful contraction, and that leads to the movements in our body. So since they are showing this rapid and powerful contraction, what happens to these type of muscles? They'll get fatigued very fast. So they require rest. So what does these muscles help us in? It helps us in breathing, it helps us in swallowing, blinking of eyes, and also it helps us in voluntary movements in our body. So whatever movement I am showing, now I am taking my hands like this, I am talking, everything is because of the voluntary muscles or the skeletal muscles present in our body. So next is the smooth muscles. Why are they called smooth? Because they do not have these alternate dark and light striations. They are also called as involuntary muscles, because they involve in the involuntary actions in our body. They are also called as visceral muscles because they are found in the visceral organs in our body. So there are three names for our smooth muscles, that is smooth muscles, involuntary muscles and visceral muscles. So these cells are uninucleated and they have tapering ends and they do not show branching. And these muscles will show slow contraction and relaxation. So that is why they will not get fatigued. So these are found mainly in the walls of alimentary canal, internal organs, urinogenital tract, then blood vessels, bronchi, iris. All these places are having the smooth muscles. The peristaltic movement in our alimentary canal is an example of contraction of smooth muscles. And the type of smooth muscle contraction which we can feel is the urinary bladder contraction at the time of micturition. Now coming to the third type of muscles, that is the cardiac muscles. So the name itself suggests where you can find these muscles. So they are found in the walls of heart. They are involuntary muscles and they are slightly or faintly striated. They are branched, They are uninucleated and they joined end to end to form a network. And these muscles will contract and relax rhythmically and will never get fatigued. Imagine what will happen if our heart muscles get fatigued. So now we are going to learn the structure of muscle. So this is very important as to learn the structure of muscles, to learn how contraction of muscle is taking place as well as how movement is taking place. So the skeletal muscles in our body is made up of a number of muscle bundles which are also called as the fascicles. So these are the fascicles. So each fascicle or the muscle fascicle or muscle bundle is made up of muscle fibers. So many muscle fibers together forms the muscle bundle or fascicle, and many fascicles or muscle bundles will combine together to form a muscle. So these muscle fibers are covered by the plasma membrane called as the sarcolemma, and inside sarcolemma the cytoplasm is present, that is the sarcoplasm. And this sarcoplasm is syncytium because they are multinucleated or more than one cell nucleus is present. So this muscle fibers also have endoplasmic reticulum, also called as sarcoplasmic reticulum, and this sarcoplasmic reticulum is a reservoir of calcium. So why this sarcoplasmic reticulum is reservoir of calcium and what is the use of calcium, this we will be learning at the time of mechanism of muscle contraction. Now, this myofibrils, so the characteristic features of this muscle fiber is having parallelly placed large number of myofibrils or muscle fibrils, and this myofibrils or muscle fibrils have alternate dark and light striations because of the presence of contractile proteins, that is actin and myosin. Now we are going to learn the structure of contractile proteins. So what are the contractile proteins? Actin and myosin are the contractile proteins. So first we will see about the actin. The thin filament or the actin filaments are made up of three proteins, and there one is actin, then we have the troponin and the tropomyosin. And this actin filaments are made up of 2 F-actin. So this actin is made up of 2 polymeric filamentous or F-actin filaments. These two filaments are wound around each other, and this F-actin is made up of monomers of G-actin. So each one is a monomer of G-actin, and these G-actin will combine together to form F-actin, and like that 2 polymeric filamentous chains are together wind up to form a filamentous actin. The tropomyosin filaments will coil around the actin throughout its length. Then where can you find troponin? These troponins are found on specific points on your tropomyosin, and they cover the or they protect the myosin binding sites of actin. So the troponin has 3 subunits. So I, C and T are the 3 subunits of troponin. So what is I? I is the inhibiting subunit. C is the place where calcium comes and bind to. And T is a subunit which is attached to the tropomyosin. Next we will learn the structure of myosin filaments. These myosin filaments are also called as thick filaments. And these are polymeric proteins which are made up of monomers of a protein, that is the meromyosin. So that is why this myosin is also called as meromyosin. So there are mainly 2 parts for this meromyosin. One is head and the other one is tail. So the head part is, that is heavy meromyosin, and the tail part is light meromyosin. And the head portion of this meromyosin contains actin binding site as well as ATP binding sites. And there is also a crow's arm present in this meromyosin. The myosin head has ATPase activity. So because of this ATPase activity, at resting state, ATP is converted into ADP plus IP, inorganic phosphate. That is called as the hydrolyzation of ATP. So what is sarcomere? Sarcomere is a fundamental unit of muscle contraction. So these are made up of actin and myosin filaments, and which is repeating in a particular pattern. And the myofibrils are made up of hundreds of sarcomere that are linked end to end. Now this is the structure of a sarcomere, that is the functional unit of muscle contraction. So it has an I band, that is isotropic band. Then it has an A band, that is anisotropic band. So now you can see here that the thin filament, that are the actin filaments, are sliding over the thick filament, that are the myosin filaments. So this is the sliding filament theory which best explains the mechanism of muscle contraction. So why I band is called as isotropic band? You can see here in this region only actin filaments are present, no myosin filaments are present, and this region is only having one type of filament. So these two regions you can see is only made up of actin filaments. So your I band is only made up of actin filaments. So they're isotropic band. Now coming to the A band. So these are the regions of A band. So here you can find both I band as well as both myosin as well as actin. So there are two types of muscle proteins present. So that is why it is called as anisotrophic band. And these thin filaments that are actins are firmly attached to the Z line. And the region between two Z lines are called as the sarcomere. So the thick filaments in the A band is also held together by a fibrous thin membrane called as the M line. And the central part of the thick filament, which is not overlapped by the thin filament, is called as the H zone. So now let us see the mechanism of muscle contraction. So what initiates the contraction of skeletal muscle? The contraction of skeletal muscle is initiated by the signal that is sent from the central nervous system through a somatic motor neuron. So somatic motor neuron along with the muscle fiber that is attached to it together forms the motor end plate. And now in this diagram you can see the motor unit or the motor end plate. So you can see here this is the somatic neuron and this is the skeletal muscles. So here in this region or this junctions are the motor end plate or the motor unit. So the electrical impulse are transmitted through the neurons. So once it reaches the axon terminal, what happens? It is getting converted into electrical impulse, right? So they are called as neurotransmitters. So once the electrical impulse is reaching the postsynaptic neuron, it is getting converted into electrical form, that is the neurotransmitters. And the neurotransmitters which are present in the vesicles will fuse to the plasma membrane and they will release their neurotransmitter, that is the acetylcholine, into the synapse. And once the acetylcholine is released into the synapse, what will happen? The neurotransmitters will bind to the receptors present in the postsynaptic neurons. This will generate an action potential and that action potential will reach the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And this sarcoplasmic reticulum is a reservoir of calcium, as I have told you before. So these sarcoplasmic reticulums will release lot of calcium ions. And these calcium ions, what they will do? They will go and bind to the calcium binding site of troponin. And thus what will happen? The tropomyosin will move away from its position and thus uncover the myosin binding sites of actin, or that are the active sites of actin. So I have already told you in the resting state this myosin head has ATP as activity. So at the time of resting, what they will do? They will hydrolyze the ATP into ADP and inorganic phosphate. By utilizing this energy, this myosin head will come and bind to the active sites of actin. And this leads to the formation of a cross bridge. And after this, what will happen? This inorganic phosphate is removed and after that ADP is also removed. So what happens now? This activated cross bridge will pull the actin filaments towards the center of A band. Z lines are attached to the actin filaments, right? So this Z lines also will come closer. And this causes the shortening of your sarcomere and this is called as the contraction. Now what will happen? Another ATP will combine bind to the ATP binding site of myosin and this lead to the breaking of cross bridge from the active sites. And this ATPs will again get converted into or hydrolyzed into ADP and IP and again they will get attached to the active sites and the cycle repeats. So this process will continue until the calcium ions are pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And that happens only when the release of acetylcholine is stopped. And what does this result in? This result in again masking of the active sites in actin. Now we will see a simplified representation of mechanism of muscle contraction. So here what will happen? The calcium ions are binding to the troponins and this leads to the exposure of myosin binding sites in actin. Then what will happen? The myosin hydrolyzes ATP and this leads to the gaining of energy and that releases ADP and IP. And with this energy, the myosin head will bind into the actin. And these actins are pulled towards the end line. Then the two lines come closer to each other and this leads to the shortening of sarcomere. And this is called as the muscle contraction. Then what will happen at the time of relaxation? Calcium ions are pumped back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum and the myosin binding sites are again masked. Then actin and myosin can't interact now, and at this time our actin and myosin cannot interact. Now we can see in short what is happening during muscle contraction. So the cross bridge will pull the attached actin filaments towards the A band. Z line will come closer. Your I band length will reduce. A band will remain the same length and H zone will almost get disappeared. There are two types of muscle fibers. One is red muscle fiber and the other one is white muscle fiber. So the red muscle fiber is also called as aerobic muscle fibers because it contains a lot of myoglobin. That is a red color pigment which provides it with red color, and this contains a lot of mitochondria. Then what are white muscle fibers? They are also called as anaerobic muscles. They are white or they are pale in color because of the less availability of myoglobin as well as mitochondria in them. But comparing to that of the red muscles, the white muscles have a lot of sarcoplasmic reticulum in them. So now we will see the most interesting topic of this chapter, that is the human skeletal system. So human skeletal system is made up of both bones as well as cartilage. So a human body is made up of 306 bones, out of which 80 are axial bones and 126 are appendicular bones. So the axial skeleton consists of skull, vertebrae, ribs and sternum. And the appendicular skeleton consists of griddle bones and limb bones. So there are different types of bones in skulls. One is cranium, then we have facial, then hyoid and the ear ossicles. Then coming to the vertebrae, there are 5 types of vertebrae. The cervical vertebrae, thoracic vertebrae, lumbar vertebrae, sacral vertebrae and cochlear vertebrae. Then the ribs are there are 12 pairs of ribs. Then coming to the sternum, it is a single bone that is present, also called as the breastbone. Coming to the griddle bones, there are 2 types of griddle bones. One is pectoral griddle and the one is pelvic griddle. Then the limb bones, there are 2 types of limbs, that are the forelimbs that are hands and the hind limbs that are our legs. And now we will see complete skeletal system in detail. So coming to our skull. The skull is made up of 29 bones. That are 8 cranial bones, 14 facial bones, 6 ear ossicles and 1 hyoid bone. So first we will see the 8 cranial bones. So there are 2 parietal bones, 2 temporal bones, 1 occipital bones, 1 ethmoid bone, 1 sphenoid bone and 1 frontal bone. So frontal, sphenoid, ethmoid and occipital bones are only 1 present. Parietal, temporal are 2 present. So coming to the facial bones, there are 14 facial bones in our skull. So the first one is nasal. There are 2 nasal bones, 2 lacrimal which are present here, 2 nasal bones which are present here. Then we have inferior nasal concave that is present somewhere like this here. Then we have the maxilla, that is the upper jaw, and we have the mandible, that is the lower jaw. Then the palatine which is present somewhere here, and the zygomatic which are the bones present here. Then the vomer which is the one present in the center of your nose. So the mandible is only 1 present, that is lower jaw only 1 is present and the upper jaw 2 maxilla are present. Coming to the 6 ear ossicles. We have 2 ears, each ear have 3 ear ossicles. So total we have 6 ear ossicles. So we have malleus, incus and stapes. These 3 are the ear ossicles which are present inside the ear. And out of this, the stapes is the smallest bone which is present in our body. And we have a single hyoid bone present which is found here. So you can see here. So now coming on to the ribs. There are 24 ribs present in our body. That is 12 pairs of ribs. So the first 7 pairs of ribs are called as the true bones, because they articulate to the sternum in the ventral side and to the vertebral column in the dorsal side. Then the next 3, that is 8, 9 and 10. These 3 are called as false ribs. So why they are called as false ribs? Because they will be articulating to the 7th vertebrae and will be joining into the sternum in the ventral side, and dorsal side they are attached to the vertebral column. The last 2, 11 and 12, they are called as floating ribs. Why are they called as floating ribs? Because they are only attached to the vertebral column and they are not attached ventrally to the sternum. So you can see here a flat bone is present, and this flat bone is called as the sternum, or is this also called as the breastbone. Coming to the vertebral column, there are 26 vertebrae present in our vertebral column. That is the 7 cervical vertebrae, the 12 thoracic vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae. Then we have 1 sacral vertebrae which is fused with 5 bones and 1 cochlear vertebrae which is fusion of 4 different types of bones. Our skull is dicondylic. Why they are called as dicondylic? Because there are 2 condyles present and these are the 2 condyles to which your vertebral column is coming and attaching to. Now the first vertebrae is called as the atlas and the second vertebrae is called as the axis. You can see here this is dense and this is the region which articulates to the other vertebrae. And there is a central region or the central canal present, also called as the neural canal, because your spinal cord is situated in that neural canal. Coming to the pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle is made up of 2 different coccyx bones. Okay, so these are the 2 bones. So this is one and this is the other bone. And these 2 bones are having 3 different regions. One is ilium, pubis and ischium. So next we will see the pectoral girdle. Pectoral girdle is made up of 4 bones, that is 2 scapula and 2 clavicle. These clavicles are also called as the collar bones. See the bones which we can find here, that is the collar bones are the clavicle. A triangular flattened bone, that is the scapula, is present and this scapula is present between 2nd and 7th rib. And there is a glenoid cavity present onto which the humerus is coming and attaching to. So coming to the forelimbs, we have 60 bones in forelimbs. So that is 30 on left side and 30 on right side. So one hand we will see now. We have 1 humerus, 1 radius, 1 ulna, 8 carpals, 5 metacarpals and 14 phalanges. So in the right hand side, if this is the right hand side, we will see for the left hand side. So we have total 2 humerus in our forelimbs. We have 2 radius in our forelimbs. We have 2 ulna in our forelimbs, 16 carpals in our forelimbs, 10 metacarpals in our forelimbs and 28 phalanges in our forelimbs. So these are carpals, metacarpals and these are the phalanges. Now coming to the hind limbs, we have 60 hind limbs. And each leg, that is your left and right, has 30 each. So you can see which all are they. You have 1 femur present, that is a thigh bone. Then we have fibula. Then we have 1 tibia. Then 7 tarsals are there, 5 metatarsals and 14 phalanges are present. And we have 1 kneecap or knee bone, that is called as the patella. This is the knee bone, your kneecap. So total we have 30 in the left hand side and 30 in the right hand side. So that all together constitutes 60 hind limbs. So these are the tarsals, these are the metatarsals and these are the phalanges present. So now we are going to see different types of joints in our body. So the first one is fibrous joint. They are immovable joints. And they are mainly found in the skull. Okay. So now coming to the cartilaginous joints, these are having slight movements. Okay, so slightly movable. So they are found connecting the ribs between the vertebrae. The connection between 2 pelvic bones, that is pubic symphysis. And the type of joints which are easily movable is called as the synovial joint. And there are 6 types of synovial joint. There is the plain, hinge, pivot, condylic, saddle and ball and socket joint. So now we will see the structures and we will learn about them in more. This is the structure of fibrous joint which is present in your skull, and this is connected by dense fibrous connective tissue and these form stachures. So they are immovable, they cannot be moved. Now coming to the cartilaginous joints. So the first one is between the vertebrae. Then the next one is found in when the ribs are attaching to the sternum, they are attached through the costal cartilage. Then in between the coccyx bone in the pelvic girdle, the pubic part is connected through the pubic symphysis and this is also a cartilaginous joint. Now coming to the different types of synovial joints. So the first one is pivot joint which is present between the atlas and axis, that is the first and the second vertebrae. Then we have the hinge joint that is present in the elbow or the knees. And the condylic bones are present between the carpals. Then the ball and socket joint present in the articulation of humerus as well as femur. Then we have the plane joint which is present in the angle, and we have the saddle joints which are present between the phalanges. So now we are moving on to the disorders. First one is myasthenia gravis, which is an autoimmune disorder, and this affects the neuromuscular knots, and this leads to the fatigue or weakness or paralysis of skeletal muscles. And the next one is muscular dystrophy, and this is a genetic disorder, and this causes progressive destruction of skeletal muscles. So next we will see tetany. Tetany causes rapid muscular spasms, and this is due to the low levels of calcium ions in our body. Then we have arthritis, that is nothing but the inflammation of joints. Then gout. Gout is nothing but the accumulation of uric acid crystals in joints, and this can cause inflammation of joints. So next is osteoporosis, and this leads to the reduction of bone mass, and this is an age-related disease, and this is caused mainly due to the decreased amount of estrogen in our body. So that's all with the chapter. So what we have learned till now? We have learned the types of movements, we learned about types of muscles, then we learned about the structure of muscles, then we learned about the sarcomere, different protein filaments that are present, that is actin and myosin, their structure, mechanism of muscle contraction. Then we learned about the human skeletal system, that is the axial skeletons and appendicular skeletons. So I think you all understood this. So if you have any doubt, you can drop a message in the comment section, or you can directly send me messages. I'll be clearing it for you. So thank you and have a nice day.